thanks everyone for coming. We're really excited to, talk about travel insurance and answer all your questions. Obviously, there are quite a few these days going forward with travel. My name's Laura. I live in Austin, Texas, and I am one of the co-owners for Traverse Journeys. So we create small group trips all over the world in 25 plus countries, and we focus on people, planet, and purpose with immersive and transformative travel experiences. And at the moment, while we are all grounded, we are creating and hosting lots of online events. So whether you found us through Meetup or Eventbrite or Internations, you can see a lot of our upcoming events usually through Eventbrite. We'll always list them there. So we virtually travel to different destinations. We've got an event coming up where we're going to travel to Croatia, and we're going to do these travel talks on the second Tuesday of each month. So this time next month we'll do another event like tonight. And so if you have any recommendations or things that you would like to see us focus on for next month's theme, feel free to let me know. And I'll pass it over now to our other fantastic host who's kind enough to join us, Mr. Aaron Fish.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hey, everybody. It's good to see you all. My name is Aaron Fish. Valerie, I am a neighbor of yours. I live in Northeast Portland. And Laura and Ashley have been very kind to invite me on today. We've been working together for a little while now, just to help people that are traveling with Traverse Journeys to be properly insured when they are looking for travel insurance. My company is called Wanderwell. We are a relatively young company. We're actually an insurance agency we're developing our own plans right now, but we are focused on travel insurance from a very similar standpoint of that and values alignment with Traverse Journeys. We are a certified B Corp. We are 1% for the Planet business member. And we just believe that wherever we go, however we get there, whatever we do and wherever we eat, we're creating an impact. And we would like to be able to offset the impact that we and our travelers make. So we donate. Our commitment and our goal is to get up to 10% of our revenue every year is donated to nonprofits affiliated with 1% for the Planet and other other nonprofits that are promoting sustainable and regenerative travel. We're also an ally member of the Transformational Travel Council. And travel insurance has been a hot topic, especially since in the past few months. And that's why we're all here today. So I want to make sure that I'm here to answer a lot of your questions. I'll let you know ahead of time that I'm not a claims examiner. I don't even play one on TV. But I do have a lot of experience with experiences involved in travel insurance, including claims. So I can give a good idea of what benefits are, the range of benefits that are around, some guidance on what you can look for. But a lot of what I'm suggesting today might essentially just be some guidance, not necessarily a guarantee is what's going to happen within a certain plan. And I know that everyone, including me, hates to hear that when it's about insurance. But what I think is the most important thing about insurance is to create proper expectations. And because a lot of insurance experiences can be negative, but when you create a proper expectation of what you're going to get out of insurance and the policy that you buy, then that can help to create a more positive experience overall. But anyway,
yeah.
Long story. And
no, that's great. Yeah, thank you. It kind of gives people a good idea of kind of what to expect during today's meeting. And just to kind of piggyback off that, like the flow for this will essentially, I'll ask some kind of general questions about travel insurance in general to Aaron, and just kind of make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to some basic definitions and ideas in regards to travel insurance. And then, of course, the burning questions that everyone has in relation to COVID-19. We'll go over some of that. And then hopefully, you know, not much more than halfway through, we'll start to kind of open it up to your questions and your specific, you know, things that you're looking to get answered. And yeah, hopefully we won't go too much over an hour, but we'll try and also make sure that we address everyone's questions. So yeah, and you already mentioned the disclaimer of, you know, this is not official guarantees, anything that we say in the call. We're just helping and hoping to, yeah, give some guidance and give you also just the tools that you need to ask the right questions when looking for travel insurance policies. So with all of that said, let's just start, I guess, with the very basic, what are the two kinds of travel insurance that people, you know, will find when they look for this thing called travel insurance?
Yeah, it's not everybody knows that there are two or more different types of travel insurance that are available in the market. Mostly, you know, you guys might think of travel insurance or equate it with what people kind of popularly refer to as trip cancellation insurance. And that might be the most popular or the most well-known. Trip cancellation insurance generally is designed to cover trip cancellation and interruption for the primary reasons are injury, illness, or death to you, a travel companion, or an immediate family member not traveling with you, to unforeseen inclement weather, to a terror attack. That is also, a lot of times you'll hear the word unforeseen. And then it'll cover things like trip delay, baggage, and including medical. Not every insurance carrier does offer medical with their trip cancellation plans, but I would say most of them do. From anywhere from around $5,000 in medical up to $500,000 in medical on a trip cancellation plan. Those plans can also offer upgrades like cancel for any reason, which is a hot topic now and we'll get to later. The other type of insurance, travel insurance, which can usually be purchased for in a longer duration of a trip, is travel medical insurance. And travel medical insurance generally doesn't have any of the pre-departure benefits, meaning trip cancellation, and often doesn't have trip interruption benefits, but it does cover travel medical claims, usually much more comprehensively. And because some of those claims are not as expensive, the travel medical insurance can often be more cost effective than a trip cancellation plan, or not more cost effective, but cheaper on a daily rate because the rate is not based on the cost of your trip. And those are growing in popularity immensely, especially as people start to take longer trips. And we've seen that in the last 3 or 4 years, that people are starting to travel for much longer periods of time. Essentially, those are the two primary forms of travel insurance. There are other types, but most of them are what we would call international health insurance plans, which are built for employees who are internationally assigned, expats, individuals and families who are expats, and employees who are of companies who are traveling for business internationally.
Okay, great. Yeah, so travel medical or trip cancellation and trip interruption, both or one or the other, is kind of, yeah, the typical buckets. And then next question, I guess. Even though travel insurance policies vary greatly from one to the next, what are the basic kind of baseline, you know, things that travelers can expect out of, you know, a trip cancellation and trip interruption policy or their travel medical policy?
Yeah. We'll start with trip protection, I guess. Actually, you know what we'll do? We'll start with travel medical because we can kind of, I'll go to trip protection next, and then trip protection will probably end up as it has been in many other conversations like this in the past few months, it's taken up the bulk of the conversation. So if that's okay, I'll start with the travel medical. It doesn't take as
Yeah.
much. So travel medical plans are really designed. Travel medical only plans is what I tend to call them. Are really designed to cover the expenses of an illness or an injury while you are traveling, while you're on your trip. They're generally ideal for leisure, sometimes business travel, missionary travel. There's a lot of missionary groups that will purchase this type of insurance, and generally it's based on a per trip. So it's a single trip purchase. You can also purchase travel medical on multi-trip. Doesn't happen as often, but it is available. Single trip plans can usually range from, actually I wouldn't even say a range. You can generally buy a single trip plan for about 180 days to a year of coverage. There are a couple companies and carriers that will offer up to 2, sometimes even 3 years of coverage, but that is not always advised, especially because you pay for the policy up front. You can get refunded if you don't use all of it, but we'll get into that later. And we can get into it if you guys have a question about it, but it can get a little complicated, but we always encourage people to do that. And really what it's designed to do is to cover your medical expenses when you're in a foreign country. The companies that really have it together will have a contracted provider network all over the world. And you can be guided to one of those hospitals or providers, clinics, doctors, hospitals. And then if there is a contract with that hospital, then you can have what's called a guarantee of payment, a GOP. You'll often hear people say about it, or what's known as direct payment. So in the best circumstances, you can actually go to that provider, have someone on your behalf contact the insurance carrier. They will negotiate with the hospital or the doctor, and you'll never have to see a bill. When we have had customers do that, I've had one occasion in 14 years where of selling travel insurance, where the hospital did not work well with the insurance carrier.
It's a pretty reliable network.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be in network. In fact, we've had many occasions where the customer, and by the way, this works with trip protection plans too, where the customer takes that advice, calls the insurance carrier, or someone on behalf calls the insurance carrier, hands it over to the representative at the hospital, and they do the negotiation even if they're not in network.
Yeah,
doesn't always work, but it's definitely worth a chance, worth a shot.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, and just to speak to that, in the travel insurance policies that I've had to use the travel medical twice. Nothing massive or serious, but it was a pretty seamless, painless process, I found as well. So, yeah. And so, things come up even before COVID where travel insurance is helpful and useful. Don't forget
personally and professionally also, I mean, I'll running the whole, with all my values and all my feelings about the industry in general, the reason I'm still in insurance is because of travel insurance, because I've actually found that it has been the most reliable form of insurance. It is complicated. It is complicated to understand. Absolutely expect it to be complicated. But if you have the proper expectations, it can really be worth it.
Yeah.
And it can provide peace of mind in a time when you may have a hard time finding that.
And I guess it doesn't always have to be complicated. Like, I think those two cases were, it really was, it wasn't that complicated. It was just a pretty straightforward process. And to your point about, how kind of I have found to be true that the travel insurance world has been a very easy process compared to other insurance experiences, whether it's auto insurance or something like that, where it seems like sometimes the, claims adjuster is trying to figure out a way to not pay your costs or whatever. Whereas, and we talked about this before, in the travel insurance world, I often feel like, they're really trying everything they can to figure out how they can pay, your claim, and they're really on your side. So that's been helpful and nice.
Yeah, I found that too. And Laura, you and I have talked about this a few times, that there's the Claims examiners are people. They're humans. And they have to follow a set of rules, definitely. But they're also open to you making your case. And I always encourage people, if you have a claim, even if we can look at the policy beforehand and say, you're probably not going to get anything out of this, I'll encourage people, submit the claim. Take 20 minutes, gather all your documents, put the information in, submit a claim. You never know. You never know. And you have an opportunity to make your case. Yeah. And it could be worth it. And also, I would say part of the reason that the insurance carriers have a lot of money is that a lot of people don't submit claims, even when they have one.
Yeah. So what are sort of some of the baselines that people can expect from a trip interruption or trip cancellation policy? Yeah. There usually is kind of a list of covered reasons that, you might need to cancel or have, a delay or whatever that will be covered. What are some of those basics?
Okay. And by the way, something that's usually covered in both travel medical only and in trip protection plans is emergency medical evacuation. And I'll add on to that when I come back to that within the trip protection. So on your trip protection plan, which generally is trip cancellation, trip protection plans are designed to cover and ensure the investment of your trip. And that's why the rate is based on the cost of your trip. It's based on more factors than that. It's actually based on the destination, the region of the world you're going to.
And the duration. Right.
The duration. Usually anything under 15 days is not going to be impacted by the rate. But once you get over 15 days, then the rate, there's a multiplier that can affect the rate. The cost of the trip, and did I say your age? That's the first thing, the age of the traveler. Trip protection plans, at the very basics, are designed to cover trip cancellation, trip interruption, which means if you have to return home due to a covered reason while you're already on your trip, after you've already departed home. Mm-hmm. Baggage and personal effects, including delays, travel delays, and then medical, travel medical is included in that. And on top of that, the emergency medical evacuation. At the basics, you're going to have those categories, those benefits. Yeah. Now, there are many plans out there that will vary. Even if they have those benefits embedded, there are upgraded plans or upgraded levels of coverage that can also include things like I'll get to cancel for any reason in a minute, like collision damage waiver, which would be if you're renting a car, or misconnection. Misconnection's often in a plan as a basic, but it's not in every single plan. Misconnection generally refers to a cruise, though. People will often, it's not always even in the small print, it is not often stated that it is for for a flight. It usually is specific to a cruise, not always. And then also there's upgrades or add-ons, or what they call riders, for things like cancel for any reason, and also for hazardous activities, or what people would call adventure sports. Right. Another thing, something to consider within there, which is going to be a hot topic, I'm sure it's going to be something that we're going to get a question about, is cancel for any reason. Cancel for any reason is an upgrade that is time sensitive. And what I mean by that is, for every insurance carrier that I know of, except for one that works with travelers who are outbound from the United States, if you want cancel for any reason, you would have to purchase your insurance within an allotted period of time, starting from the moment, not just, and I'll explain this in a second, but starting from the moment where you make your initial trip payment of any kind for that trip. If that's a flight, if that's a deposit for the travel planner, if it's a hotel accommodation, whatever that initial trip payment is, that's when the clock starts. And depending on the insurance carrier you're going to be insured with, it could be anywhere from 10 to 21 days after that moment, meaning that it's actually 9 to 20 days, because they count that day that you're in when you make that initial deposit, initial payment, to then purchase your insurance, to have the eligibility to pay up to have cancel for any reason. And on top of that, this is the craziest piece. Depending on the state you live in, because travel insurance is not necessarily regulated federally, it is regulated nationally, meaning that there are many states that adopt, it's actually a new legislation that has been adopted by 48 states. It has not been implemented really yet. It was supposed to this year. But anyway, 48 states have adopted this. But every state has their own insurance laws. So there are some states that just don't allow cancel for any reason, period. If you live in New York, their laws don't allow cancel for any reason. So it doesn't matter what insurance carrier you go with. Florida has some weird laws around cancel for any reason. Depending on the insurance carrier you work with, you might not be eligible for 75% of your investment back, your trip costs. It might be limited to 50%. Some states do
that. That's based on the state.
Based on the state that you live in. Yeah.
It's not based on any other reason, like the amount of refund that you get with your cancel for any reason?
So insurance carriers essentially file their proposals. They file a plan with with each state, and the states can come back and say, well, we don't want your plan to have this. And so essentially you could have the same plan for all 50 states, but then some benefits are different depending on the state you live in. It's really,
and just to kind of piggyback off of these topics while we're talking about it. So yes, to Frank, New York, as you mentioned, does not, permit or allow for the cancel for any reason add-ons. And then can you speak to, is that, are cancel for any reason policies or add-ons typically available outside of the U.S. to non-U.S. travelers?
I see it once in a while. It's funny, I was in a conversation with a couple of weeks ago with Phil from World Nomads, and World Nomads has never done it. They've never had cancel for any reason. And there's a few other carriers, some of the big carriers, that just have not implemented it yet for residents and citizens of countries outside of the United States. It's, we're all kind of getting used to the landscape post the start of COVID too. There are many insurance carriers who have taken cancel for any reason out of their plans right now. Because it's the only, I realize we're jumping around a little bit, but this is pretty, it's pertinent, to the moment. If you bought a travel insurance plan right now for trip protection, expecting it to cover you for a trip that you're planning in the fall, and you bought travel insurance because you want it to cover you in case it's canceled, the trip is canceled due to COVID, it won't be covered.
Right.
You are eligible for cancel for any reason and you purchase it, yes, you should be covered then if you cancel the trip and file a claim for that reason, if it's canceled because of COVID. However, cancel for any reason doesn't give you 100%. If you cancel for a reason not otherwise covered in the plan, then you would only get up to approximately 75%, depending on the state you live in, somewhere between 50 and 75%.
Yeah. So I kind of want to get into a little bit about, we kind of started to get into the COVID situation, but before we do that, I just wanted to talk about one more add-on that might be good to mention, which is the pre-existing conditions.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really important one that kind of where insurance carriers have kind of missed the mark for a lot of years because it's not very well publicized. But pre-existing conditions is not necessarily an add-on, but the plans that do include coverage for pre-existing conditions also make it a time-sensitive. It's time-sensitive to the purchase of the insurance. So and of the date of initial trip payment. Mm-hmm. If you want a trip protection plan that can include pre-existing condition coverage, to include that, then you would actually have to purchase within the allotted time period within that plan. Now it ranges from usually 14 days to 21 days from the moment that you make your initial trip payment of any kind. So the plans that we offer, we have two plans that offer pre-existing condition coverage. One of them is 14 days. So it's essentially 13 days because you have to count the day that you made your initial trip payment. and the other one is 21 days or 20 days. If you purchase outside of that time zone, that time frame, then you won't have coverage for pre-existing conditions. I have seen claims be completely denied because the person had a pre-existing condition, and that is why that traveler had to cancel their trip. In every occasion, the traveler knew what to expect. In every occasion that I've seen happen, the traveler knew, okay, I'm probably not gonna get it. They were not surprised. But those travelers, the next time they purchased insurance, they did it immediately after like within a couple of days of making their initial booking for their trip.
I mean, and we tell people all the time, when they sign up for one of our trips, like, make sure you secure your travel insurance policy right away, as soon as you've given us a deposit or bought your flight or whatever, because of these, things that are only available within that first couple weeks. And people still, a lot of times, it's like, yeah, I'll get my travel insurance, policy later. And they just kind of side note it. And then, it's kind of, so
by the way,
of course,
you're not alone if you don't buy travel insurance. You're not alone. You're in the vast majority. And there's, we try to follow these like benchmarking reports, throughout the years. And as of 2018, approximately 7.5% of all international travelers departing from the United States bought travel insurance. 7.5%.
Yeah, and we actually require it for anyone who signs up on our trips, just to make sure that people are covered if anything should happen, medically or whatever. But it's not usually that expensive, and for the peace of mind that you get. And again, even before COVID, and even if nothing COVID related is covered, I myself have had, claimed 3 times off of a travel insurance policy. And we see it all the time with our guests that, that they're happy that they have it because it comes in handy.
Yeah. So, there are times when it can be pretty expensive. But you're right. Sure, in a lot of cases, in a lot of cases, it can be relatively affordable, but it is relative. And at the same time, my parents, my parents are, they're in their late 60s. And once you hit 60, the multiplier for the rate for trip protection coverage and for travel medical goes way up. It actually goes up a lot of times, depending on the insurance carrier, it'll go up at like 50, and then it'll go up way higher at 60, and at 70, it can really go astronomical. So what I tend to tell people is, because trip protection policies are because the rates are based on your age, consider that the range of rates could be anywhere between 4 and 12% for the most part of your trip cost. So if you have a $10,000 trip cost and you're under the age of 50, you might expect it to be around 6% of your trip cost. If you get to north of 60, it could go up to 10, 12% of your trip cost. The highest I've ever seen it is 18%. And that could be a lot of money. By the way, that person bought the policy. They spent $7,000 on their travel insurance policy.
Was it like with all the add-ons, and they were going to do all the extreme sports, or
zero add-ons? Interesting. I mean, and in some cases, by the way, I'll tell people all the time, no obligation. First of all, if you don't want to buy travel insurance, I'm not going to pressure you. I don't even feel like a salesman ever. I just want, if you need travel insurance and you want help, we can help you. If you don't want to buy it, fine. And if you want to buy it not from us, great. No obligation, no pressure. But look into it, and there might be other options. So for example, very often we work with a lot of companies that sell trips that are $25,000 to like $40,000 a person to go on the trip. And I'll always tell people when they contact us first, okay, call your credit card right now. The credit card that you paid for this trip with, see if they will if they'll include coverage for this trip, or if you can pay a little extra and they'll also cover the trip, because it could be a lot less than what you get from us and get from our carriers. The only difference is you're probably not going to get a cancel for any reason upgrade on it because the credit cards just don't do that.
Right.
There might be a few. I don't know of any. And I don't know of any that include coverage for pre-existing conditions.
Okay.
So in some ways you get what you pay for. However, if you've got a pretty good credit card, you might be able to have the coverage you need.
So while we're talking about that, and since a few questions have come in kind of in regards to that, do you see, besides the 60-day maximum stay limit, do you see any sort of problems, I guess, besides the no cancel for any reason or no pre-existing condition coverage with the Chase Sapphire Reserve card? Has that ever been one that you've specifically looked into or know anything about whether or not that is a comprehensive or a reliable travel insurance policy?
Yeah, Chase Sapphire. I and by the way, I'm just going to tell you what I see most often when people.
Yeah, exactly.
When people tend to go with their credit cards, I generally see them go with the Chase card. Sorry, not Chase Sapphire. It's Chase Sapphire and the Capital One. Capital One has a card.
The Venture one. The Venture.
I actually have to go back and look that up. And it actually, you know who writes a really good piece about it is the Points guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know the Points guy.
Yeah, the Points guy is great for comparing the credit cards benefits for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes for some of the extras, I've actually not insured the extras through travel insurance. I have an Amex card. That I use for my trip for the extras. Like if I'm going to rent a car, last year I rented a car in Spain and Portugal for 3 weeks. It was like 800. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the rate for the car. It was $200 less for me to insure the rental through American Express than it was for me to insure it at the counter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. You have options. Now, you with anything like that, make sure you carry all the proof, because sometimes the rental counters can be kind of sticklers about trying to get you to buy their insurance.
Yeah, it's just right on my phone. I literally had it.
So, it's essentially, credit card travel insurance can be, sufficient. Especially with the best kind of travel cards like the Chase Sapphire, the Capital One, Venture One or whatever. But it's never going to, probably not going to include cancel for any reason or pre-existing conditions. And is that something that you can add? So if you have, a travel insurance policy through your credit card, can you then supplement it with a separate travel insurance policy, or do you run into issues then being like double covered?
Well, probably most of us do have credit cards, and if we're using a credit card to pay for the for the trip, there's a good chance that a lot of us paying for a trip are going to have some sort of coverage on their credit card. It's most likely not going to be nearly as comprehensive as a plan that you would buy as a retail plan that you would buy through just to buy separately through any of the insurance carriers or through an agency. So having two plans is almost unavoidable.
Okay.
However, coordination of benefits, I've never known people to actually use it that way. What I mean that is, if you file the same claim with two different insurance carriers, it would essentially be fraudulent. So I guess it's, that people could try to do it, but I would never suggest that or recommend it.
Yeah. So just to circle back real quick and make sure we covered the COVID news, you had, I think, already mentioned that becoming ill with COVID while on your trip is typically, or should be expected to be covered in your travel medical policy, which also includes if you need to get a test, right? You had.
Well, in the past few months, it's not necessarily the trip protection plans that I've seen publicized that they're going to pay a cost share for testing for COVID.
You mean the travel medical, not the trip protection, right?
No, the travel medical plans have been pretty upfront that they're gonna help pay for it.
Right. Okay. So that's all I was saying in that statement, that your travel medical policy will typically cover your COVID test if you need to get one.
It has been. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. It could last a while, and it also depends on where you are if the test is even available.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
GeoBlue is the company that for travel medical that I trust the most, and that's what we sell. For travel medical we sell GeoBlue and Seven Corners. We just started selling working with Seven Corners, and it's been positive. GeoBlue, I personally have been working with them for 14 years, and they came out immediately and said, for all of our expat plans, testing is covered, cost share is covered for COVID and all that. And then I think they just didn't blast it out that it was going to be also for their short-term plans, because maybe a week later they said, okay, if you're on one of our plans, you've got this covered. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. The most important thing was that the cost share for treatment was going to be covered. So you had people who were, the coolest stories I heard were people that were not only in another country and had COVID or thought they had COVID and needed treatment, but also we had people stranded in other countries, and in that travel medical policy that they bought through us, they were actually able to get home, and the return flight home was paid for.
Interesting. Okay. But yeah, would that happen going forward now that it's a known?
Well, that's a different story. So now it's funny, and we're talking about this now. So as of now, we're drifting into more of what is considered trip protection policies, and right now we're on June 9th. So we're 8 days after the unofficial start of hurricane season. The first hurricane of this season actually was in January, and that was COVID. And I'm not trying to be cute. Or maybe I am a little bit, but basically what it is that if imagine you're going to go to the Bahamas, and you got this great deal to go to the Bahamas in late July. You're like, I can't pass this up. I gotta go. It would have cost me $2,000, but it's gonna cost me $1,400, and I'm really would like to save all that money. And it's going to cost me a few $100s or a couple $100s to buy the travel insurance. So if you purchase, you know that you're worried because it is hurricane season. So if you purchase that travel insurance too late and a hurricane has already been named, let's say it's Hurricane Edith, and Edith is rolling through and they predict it's going to be hitting the Bahamas or going just east of the Bahamas. Well, if you all had not purchased your travel insurance and then you purchase it after the hurricane's been named, you don't have trip cancellation or interruption coverage for that trip if Edith actually slams the Bahamas. Essentially, on January 24th and technically on January 30th, the insurance carriers recognized and named COVID as a known threat. So it was basically on January 30th and 24th for some other carriers, COVID became a named hurricane. And so if you had purchased a trip protection policy before that date, depending on the carrier, you actually, if your plan did include CDC alert and pandemic coverage, you could file a claim and have gotten 100% back. It would have been covered. There are only a handful of plans out there that even have that kind of coverage, but we had people who were in that position.
Okay. Yeah. So
are we running too fast, or is everybody?
No. I don't know. Feel free to pipe up, guys, if we're going over things too fast, or if if we're moving on from one topic to the next, but we haven't already addressed your question. So just to kind of finalize this conversation about COVID, essentially now that it's a known pandemic and a known threat and all that jazz, I think what you had mentioned to me earlier was that there isn't really any reason that trip protection, so trip cancellation or trip interruption, would be covered under a trip protection plan. If you're canceling or postponing or anything like that due to COVID, anything related to COVID, correct?
That I know of,
yeah.
No, there isn't one right now.
Yeah. Except for cancel for any reason, maybe.
And many, and I don't know how many exactly, but I can name a few that have dropped cancel for any reason. They've just dropped it. I mean, some carriers have just stopped selling insurance, period, right now. Sure. And some super producers have. Not the insurance carriers, but some of the super producers have stopped. But we've actually seen an uptick in the past week. In the past week, we have seen a few people purchase plans.
Well, I mean, I suppose no one's traveling really at the moment, but again, when travel starts, I can see, and I have seen, so many other reasons to have travel insurance, regardless of the fact that COVID isn't a covered, trip protection sort of reason. But anywho, so one thing.
Can I piggyback on that? Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
And actually, is anyone on the call right now? Is anyone calling from a different country? From a country outside the United States?
But she, I think, dropped off. Anyone else?
Tony, what country are you calling from? Are you in right now?
Well, if anyone else
might be typing it in.
Oh, Tony.
Canada, yeah. So, I'm in calls like this a few times a week. Not necessarily where I'm speaking, but involved in calls and just a participant in the call. And a lot of them are with travel tour operators and travel planners and travel agents that are in other countries outside the United States. And the one interesting thing that we hear quite often is that they're saying, well, we're going to open up pretty soon, but we're not going to allow travelers coming from the United States. Sure. And so to hear about travel picking up again, I'm curious to know from everyone, like, how comfortable do you feel right now? Do you feel like you could take smaller trips? Is that how you're going to start? You're going to go on a road trip? Are you going to take smaller, shorter flights? Are you planning to go international? If so, how are you going to get there? So you and I have talked a little bit about even what's going to happen. Are we going to have a report card or like a little passport, to say that I've been tested or I'm getting tested right when I get there?
Yeah. Feel free to type it in, guys, if anyone's planning any travel this year in 2020. I mean, there are definitely countries that are planning to open up to American travelers or already are. So they're limited, but there are a few, and it's also just travelers' comfortability themselves. So yeah, I mean, the ones that I've seen, like Iceland, Portugal, Greece, Italy, a lot of these have plans for when they will open to American travelers. And if you're Canadian, Tony, you've probably got a few more options. Not comfortable until the situation is much improved. Sure, yeah. I mean, that's, I think, a very common sentiment at the moment. But even, this conversation applies to, anyone who's booking travel for 2021 and, all of the things. So I do want to go to a couple questions that have come in about the annual plans, just to kind of talk about that and compare, contrast, like when, those longer term plans are the right option for someone to consider.
Sure. Well, when it comes to trip protection, Allianz has a multi-trip plan. I'm not even sure if they're still offering it right now, but AIG used to have one, AIG Travel Guard. They used to have one. They had stopped doing that. And then Allianz, I knew, was doing it. And it would be nice to see that be an option if the pool was big enough. Like if there were enough premiums coming in, then maybe it could actually be cost effective and attractive for people who are traveling often. What you will find, and you'll find most annual plans, and what I mean by annual is multi-trip. I'm going to call them multi-trip plans. Multi-trip plans are a plan that starts on one day and ends the day before a year later, right? So they're basically 365-day plans, but they don't renew. You can just purchase a new one for the next year.
Right.
And they generally cover, on travel medical plans, they generally cover all trips within that year that are less than a certain amount of days in length. So, for example, like
country, or what if you're traveling for 12 months?
No, then an annual plan, then a multi-trip plan is not suitable, because what it's designed to do is cover you when you're hopping back and forth. You're going for 3 weeks to Japan, you're coming back home. Then you're doing a month in Mexico, you're coming back home. You're going to go to Germany for a month and come back home. As long as each trip is under either 30, 45, or 70 days in length, depending on the insurance carrier. Mm-hmm. And those are travel medical plans. Like I said, Allianz has something similar that is for trip protection. There are some other nuances to it, but what you'll find is on a multi-trip plan, you actually will have some limited benefits. You're going to pay, it may not all be based on the cost of your trips, because you can't calculate all of that. So you're going to end up paying for it in more limited benefits. If you're going to be gone for an extended period of time, I'll backtrack a little. Trip protection plans are generally, for single trip, are generally available for durations of 30, sometimes 60, sometimes 90 days, depending on the insurance carrier and plan. Mm-hmm. If you're planning on trekking, which is we work with a ton of people who are trekking, or they're just going to be gone for a long time, or they're going somewhere else to potentially move to that other country, but they want to go check it out for a year. Mm-hmm. or 9 months. And so what we usually advise them to do is to get a short-term travel medical only plan that can sometimes be up to a year or 2 years. Okay. And in that case, it covers very comprehensively. The only downside to it is it will not cover pre-existing conditions if you are not enrolled in a domestic health insurance plan in the United States. So there are some people who will actually continue to pay their health insurance premiums in the United States, even though they're going to be gone for 6 months, right, because they want their international plan to include coverage for their pre-existing conditions. That can be pretty pricey.
What if you're a non-U.S. citizen? Is that is it similar, these annual plans and availability? And
yeah, it can be different though, because there's a very important point to make here. Of the more than 100 countries that are considered, there are the USA might be the only, or one of 3, I guess. I hate using this word, but like developed countries, that does not have a universal healthcare system. So that ends up being the factor, is that when you are departing from another country outside the United States, there is a high likelihood that you're already insured in that country domestically. So if the travel medical plan does cover pre-existing conditions, it's because you do already have that coverage. Now, obviously there's ways you're paying for it, because you're paying taxes to that country. In this country, in the United States, if you do not have a domestic plan and you buy a travel medical only plan, most likely it's going to be designed to not cover pre-existing conditions.
Okay, interesting.
And then the other way around, if you do have it, then you buy the plan that does include coverage for pre-existing conditions.
So there were a couple questions that came in during when people RSVP that I just want to go over, because they're good points to make. So one of them was about protecting all the like tech gadgets and equipment that people travel with. Some people bring a lot of camera equipment and things mm-hmm. like that. And that was actually one of the claims that I submitted once, was because a camera of mine took a dive into a river, and that was covered by my travel insurance policy. So I was able to submit a claim for it. So what kind of things should people look out for or expect in terms of covering doodads.
Okay, so this is where some sort of coordination of benefits actually can help you. Now, your travel insurance policy will likely cover baggage and personal effects. At the very minimum, you might find that it covers, if the plan has that coverage, at the very minimum, you might find that it covers $500 worth with about $100 per item max. Your camera might not have been covered in that. You can see it go up to about $2,500. Generally, I see the max at $2,000 with a $500 max per item.
Yeah.
So, something to look into before you travel and before you purchase your travel insurance policy is, do you rent a home? If so, or an apartment or condo, in that rental policy, in your rent, do you have a rental insurance policy to cover you for your rent, for your rental? Same thing with a homeowner's policy. Same thing with a business policy, because if you do have a business policy that's going to cover your personal effects, it might cover you while you're outside of your home country.
Yep.
On top of that, this is where your credit card insurance might actually help you, because if you use the credit card to purchase that equipment, you may be able to file a claim if you lose or if it's damaged or lost or stolen while you're on your trip. I call it coordination of benefits, but it's something where you're not filing the claim with your travel insurance. You're probably going to file it on your renter's, homeowner's, business, or your credit card.
So, yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great point. That often all your personal effects are covered under, your renter's insurance, your homeowner's insurance, even if you're outside of your home.
And by the way, I'm not sure it might work a little differently in other countries. For example, there are a few companies in Canada that have pretty comprehensive, I think we have like 2 or 3 people on this call from Canada that have pretty comprehensive benefits. And I highly recommend you look at those companies. One that kind of came up that I really like the model of what they've used is Goose, Goose. And they have an app. And what they've done is at least the concept is pretty different, and I think it'd be worth it for Canadians to look into that company.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So I'm just gonna start to go through some more questions that have been typed into the chat. I think we've covered some of these. We've talked about recommendations for kinds of travel insurance for long-term or short-term, annual credit card coverage. What's that?
I see a big one, and it's come up twice in the chat.
Okay. All right, jump it.
Looks like a couple people have had, of course, your trips canceled because you can't go on them. You can't get into that country. Because of COVID, there's borders that aren't open. There's flights that have been canceled by the airlines. Your travel planners had to cancel the trip for whatever reason. You've had to cancel, and you have received a full refund for all of your accommodations, including your flights. By the way, in many cases, a credit could also be deemed as a refund. The insurance carriers overall, the ones that we have worked with, and others that we even don't work with, but I'm communicating with them, have been fairly lenient and flexible throughout this time. There are some stories of where they haven't been, but in general, they've been saying, if you have not been able to take your trip and you have an insurance policy for a trip you're not taking, please show us all the proof of the refunds, the 100% refund, by the way. And an authorization or some sort of statement that you're not going to file a claim on this policy, and we will cancel your policy and refund your premium. We have had, I don't even know how many cases we've had like that. Every single one of them has been granted. 100% have been granted.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good thing. People don't realize that the actual policy itself can be refundable in the case of a trip cancellation.
Sometimes, not usually, but in an extenuating circumstance like this, yes. Right. I mean,
Laura, it certainly can be transferable sometimes as well. Like if you postpone your trip or, decide to
totally.
On new dates for your trip, in those cases, it can often, you don't lose the money you paid for your travel insurance policy necessarily.
Totally. Policy migration or a postponement of the policy to reflect new travel dates should be actually even more simple. You still have to show proof that you are booking for those dates. You still have to state that you are not going to file a claim on the original dates of the policy. Mm-hmm. And most carriers are being pretty good about it. I can see in the chat that someone had a pretty negative experience with that, and that's a bummer. I'm curious to know what happened. Maybe it's probably worth it to have some more conversations with that insurance underwriter. Yeah, it's probably worth it.
Another quick question that just came in about the recommendation, if you want to get coverage, travel medical for, in case of needing to be airlifted or, flown back to your country or something like that, what's the minimum that you recommend, that people look for in terms of the, amount? We usually, first we say minimum of 200K, but sometimes, maybe more is preferable.
Yeah, well, there's two maxes when it comes to medical. One is the travel medical benefit, and then one is the transportation benefit, which is what most people refer to as emergency medical evacuation. Moving forward, the plans that we're going to represent are the bottom level is 75,000. What I want personally is for it to be 100,000, because I've seen claims go north of 75,000, and then the injured person is actually, they're out for that money, for whatever's over that. Many policies that you'll find actually can start at like 10, 15,000, especially when you're going through a booking process, which, by the way, if you are booking a trip through a cruise or an airline, and at the end of that trip, it's asking you for travel insurance, I'm not saying don't buy travel insurance. Just watch what you're buying, because that is a custom plan, unless there's something different out there, which could happen, and I hope happens in the future. And you might get more for your money, especially on the medical side, if you decline that and then go purchase insurance on your own, especially because the booking process is not taking into account the other expenses of your trip. So if you pay for a flight for $400, and at the end of it, you tick the box that says, yes, I want travel insurance for $30 or whatever it is, what about the $2,500 that you're spending with Traverse Journeys? That's not covered in that policy. It's only covered as that $400. So really, it's kind of like buying the peanut butter cups at the checkout stand, and that's you're just getting that little snack. It's an impulse buy, and I recommend that unless you can add on, you can add on coverage at the end, which is not even available. Now, let me get back to the medical side. So most of those plans are even in the checkout process will be at like 10, 15,000, maybe 25,000 in medical. That's really low relatively. So I generally like to see people be insured at about 100,000 or above. 75,000 is pretty good. In most cases, you're not going to have to use this. I hope that that's the case almost every time.
Yeah.
But for emergency medical evacuation, the average evacuation, and I'm going to define that in a minute, but the average evacuation is somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000. It is skewed because there is one destination specifically that has much more expensive evacuations. Can anyone guess what that is? If you had to be evacuated from that place?
Anybody? US?
Oh, for medical expenses? Absolutely. The US is far and away the most expensive.
You're not a US citizen, you're traveling to the US?
Oh my goodness. There are travel insurance carriers that will not cover traveling to the US because they know that the expenses.
Or those multi-trip plans that will say, as long as you're traveling anywhere but the US versus if you also want to.
Right. A lot of expat plans will do that. They'll say you can have coverage everywhere in the world, and it's it's only this expensive because you're leaving out the US, you're carving it out. Or you could include the US and it's this much more.
But
So
that's not the most expensive evacuation.
Antarctica. Yeah, very expensive. Part of the reason is
yeah.
medical evacuation, emergency medical evacuation is not field evacuation. Field evacuation is a different benefit that's usually reserved for only a few carriers. Emergency medical evacuation means you are being transported from one facility to another facility. Generally, insurance carriers will tell you the nearest adequate facility. What would be really nice is if they would take you home. However, they can't always take on that liability because home may be too far for your health.
Right, for your safety.
So, for your safety. So they take you to really where they believe is going to be the nearest adequate facility, but more than adequate, something that's going to really be.
Exactly. I mean, there are great hospitals around the world for sure.
So think about that. If the average is 35, you're going to find that most plans are going to have $100,000 worth of emergency medical evacuation coverage. That's pretty good. You know, 100,000 is pretty good. We have the plans that we represent range from about 100,000 to 500,000.
Yeah. There was a question from Kirk about a trip that he bought to Africa that was supposed to take place in May, and he bought the trip cancellation coverage last year for this trip. Mm-hmm. One of the airlines not refunding his airfare. Would this be covered on my policy? I would think so, right? That sounds like something that should.
Was it a good
policy?
Was the trip supposed to be last month?
Yeah, May 6th.
Yeah.
And it was canceled because of COVID, right?
Correct.
So it really would depend on if your policy had that pandemic coverage.
Well, I'm not sure. They say there's some things like that in there, you know. Yeah. So it's not clear to me, all the policies.
What carrier is it? Right? What you know,
it's well, it was like I guess the W is the one that's doing the Whacker or something. I don't know.
You know what, Kurt? I mean, file a claim anyway. See what happens. I mean, these are like I said, even the insurance carriers are canceling plans and refunding for premium. They don't do that if you're past 10 days, if you're past the 10-day look back period, but it's an extenuating circumstance and you never know. I mean,
well, the carrier said they were going to give vouchers, but the problem is it's South Africa Airlines and they're in receivership and they might not survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a voucher would not be any good.
Right. Actually, and that's tough because it's not regulated the same. Like if you were taking a domestic flight in the United States and they cancel your flight, they have to refund you.
Correct. This is not in the U.S. It's between South Africa and Botswana.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth it to contact the travel insurance underwriter, the carrier for travel insurance, and try to file a claim.
Yeah, well, I've got the form from them to file a claim, but they had three options. One of them was just what you said. If I got all the money back from my trip, then I could get my money back for the policy. Well, I'm not going to get all the money back from my trip because even the trip that they canceled, they're only going to give me 2/3 of my money back.
Well, you know what? It might also be worth it to state your case to the insurance carrier. If you're going to save more money by actually, if you've been able to recoup most of your funds and you think you'll save more money by actually canceling your insurance plan and getting a refund, talk with them about that. Just tell them the situation. Tell them this is the deal. I've got this common carrier or uncommon carrier in the destination country, and they may not survive. They won't give me a refund. They will not give me a credit or a voucher. This is all I can get back. I did not take this trip, and this insurance was expensive.
Right.
It might end up costing the insurance company more money in time, effort, and a claim to pay out the claim than it will for them to say, you know what, let's just we got you. Come back to us when you plan your next trip.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I can't speak for them, but I've been seeing it happen.
Okay.
So, we can keep going for a little bit longer, not too terribly much, but in case anybody wants or needs to jump off, I just kind of wanted to say, you know, thanks for joining and thanks to Aaron, but also, you know, this little event that we're having today, you know, as you said at the beginning, it's about setting your expectations correctly for travel insurance. And, you know, one of the reasons that we really love working with Wanderwell and recommend them to all of our guests, in addition to their, you know, B Corp policies that we love, is because you can have this kind of conversation with a person, you know, as you're investigating your travel insurance policies. And, you know, instead of just going to a website and clicking on a policy and buying it, I think, you know, what we're going to see a lot more of, and what we hope to see a lot more of, is people, you know, really trying to understand, you know, their travel insurance policy and their options of what they're covered for and what they're not covered for. So really, you know, the whole idea of today is to kind of set you guys up to be able to do that and to know to do that. And, yeah, to kind of make that a best practice for buying travel insurance. Yeah, I mean, it's great to have someone who can kind of answer all your questions. And then also, if you need to file a claim, you know, like someone that you can, you know, reach out to and talk to about that.
You know,
Tony,
we wanted
I
to
do want to address real quick. So Wanderwell, on your website, you only have the option to buy insurance for U.S. citizens. However, what was it you were telling me earlier?
Yeah, so the purchasing pathway only leads you to plans that you can purchase if you are departing from the United States and a resident. Resident of the United States, yeah. So
However,
we were supposed to launch just 8 days ago on June 1st. We were supposed to launch our own branded plans that would lead you through a funnel. So if you were from depending on the country you're in, you would go through your own pathway to get to the right plan. We are, at least on our website, we are about 1 year behind now because of COVID, because the insurance underwriters have had to say, hold on a second, we need to work on all this first. So we got that notice in April. Tony, you're in Canada. We have worked with Canadian residents and citizens. You would just contact us directly. But like I said, I believe in collaboration. There are Canadian companies that do this specifically for Canadian residents and citizens, and also look into that. But I'm happy to talk with you about this. So if you get in touch, you know, we can chat about it. And I'll be able to answer questions, and you may even get some more pointed or acute answers when talking with someone from, let's say, Goose or a company in Canada.
How do we get in touch with you, Aaron? What's your contact information? How do we get in touch with you?
I only answer to smoke signals.
Mine are very, very powerful in Portland, Oregon.
What's that?
Mine are very powerful in Portland, Oregon, so they can be seen in any state.
Yeah, we have that energy. I don't know if you want, Laura, how do you can share my information?
Just type your email in the chat. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can do that too. So you can reach out to me directly. Oh, I realized I could have been responding to some of these too.
Oh, that's all right. You're busy talking.
Here's our website. And then my direct email address is, it's wanderwell.com. Wanderwell.com. A lot of people say Wanderwell, which we should probably actually get and just have it forward.
And that's me if anybody, you know, has any questions as well for anything non-insurance related. I'll just refer you to Aaron if it's insurance related. Does anybody else have any burning questions that, you know, we could answer quickly that we haven't gotten to? I see the one from Scuba Princess here. We've already talked a little bit about COVID is not covered for trip cancellation or trip disruption, but it would be covered like while you're on your trip for medical costs, typically with a travel medical policy. Any other questions though that we haven't?
Yeah, the insurance carriers have been pretty upfront that COVID is being treated medically. It's being treated as any other sickness would while you're on your trip when it comes to benefits.
Right.
So they're not discriminating. They know people are sick and
they're not trying to get out of covering that.
Yeah, that's why
Bill,
we buy the insurance.
or excuse me, Aaron, is this your private company, Go Wanderwell?
Yeah. Yes, this is our.
And
This is
you
our.
do only travel insurance, correct?
We do travel. Well, we do travel insurance, international health insurance for expats and internationally assigned employees and missionaries, and then we don't publicize this that much, but we do some small group employee benefits. So the reason we got into that is that we have a history before Wanderwell started in that business. And some people were coming to us and saying they only wanted to work with a B Corp. And in Oregon at the time and in California, there were no other insurance agencies that were B Corps. Now there are. So we started working with a few companies, but we have maybe 10.
So before we wrap up, any last questions? I'll be sure to send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with the recording. So if there's anything you want to review or go over again, or if you missed part of it, you can review the recording. And yeah, I think that's everything. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I just want to say thank you again to Aaron for joining us and giving us an hour plus of your time to answer all these questions. It's a sometimes complex, tunnel to navigate. So we really appreciate all the help that you're giving.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Laura, for having me on. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and email me, and I'm happy to talk with you.
And be sure to check out our Eventbrite for the next travel events that we're hosting. I hope to see you guys at another virtual travel event here while we're all waiting to really travel.
And when you travel again, travel with Traverse Journeys.
Thanks a lot.
We'd love to have you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.